So it's not as easy as taking your car to a service.
Yeah.
But that brings me on to the fact of maintenance. Of course, we know there are very little moving parts. They need very little lubrication and everything. So on a full EV, not a plug-in hybrid, what would be the maintenance?
Well, it's actually quite funny because when I read on the internet, especially for other Tesla owners, because Tesla actually, funnily enough, I think about 2 years ago, actually abolished this regular service schedule. Just say no more regular service. You don't need to come in first year, second year, whatever it is. Whenever things rosak, you come in. Really, in a Tesla, the only things that you really need to change will be the tires.
Right. As with any car. Right.
Top up the wiper fluid, change the wiper blades. That's it. That's it, literally.
Brake pads? Because you got regen.
Correct. So we've had Tesla owners who, like after maybe about 200,000-300,000 kilometers, they were wondering, when do I change my brake pads? And then they look at it and say, macam baru.
Wow.
Because you're right, it's actually hardly any energy gets wasted into heat by the brakes. It goes mostly back into the battery. A full EV, Tesla being the benchmark, has very, very little maintenance that needs to be done to it. Now, having said that though, what I've noticed is that for our Nissan Leafs here and BMW i3S, the local dealer insists that you go in for service. But what they do there is actually they just belik-belik the thing, software okay or not? Okay, just plug in the diagnostic, battery okay or not? Okay lah, team. Correct, because they are coming from this legacy of, you need to do regular servicing. Whereas actually there's not a lot of things that actually you can do on the EV other than those things that I mentioned earlier.
Right, so it's tires and
basically consumables lah, and then your brake pad also not really a consumable.
And it's also it's not something you change. You change it when it needs to be changed. You don't just go in at a set time.
That's right.
So I would take it that we'll get to the pros and cons right at the end. I wanted. Of course, you would want to see more EVs, more plug-in hybrids, and one, of course, it's good for the environment. It's good for efficiency. It's kinder to your wallet in terms of fuel expenses. What would you like to see changed in the ecosystem in Malaysia to make this happen?
Yeah. Well, in Malaysia specifically, I think what we have observed is that a lot of the advocacy for EVs come from users who want for as you said, it's actually to go into something that is the future, higher technology and cleaner for the environment, and more enjoyable to drive. But in Malaysia, a lot of the conversation around EV adoption is dominated by manufacturing. In the industry. So the common theme that we see online is especially, EVs are expensive today. It would be cheaper if we have local manufacturing.
Right.
I would caution against that because it's not necessarily true.
Right.
Local manufacturing may not contribute to cheaper cars. We have seen from the Proton days actually that it may even drive the cost of other cars higher because of the need to protect the local industry. So I think the important thing for us to think about is, other than those specific initiatives like lower taxes, lower road tax for EVs, is actually to look at it from a standpoint of separating the question between industrial development of EV manufacturing in Malaysia versus EV adoption in Malaysia. And sometimes those two goals come at odds to each other because it's sometimes cheaper for us to import EVs rather than to manufacture it locally.
So one is, I suppose, quantitative and qualitative, right? So of course we want to create jobs, we want more industry here, but at the same time, there is not a lot of correlation to actually buying an EV. And so, localization doesn't necessarily make it cheaper. Policies might just drive the prices of other cars up. Do you think, how would it change if, let's say, Perodua or Proton came up with a full electric car?
It's hard to say because the issue with the technology today is that it is still very, very new and there's no economies of scale. Just to give you a context, last year in 2019, there were about 2 million full electric cars that are sold globally.
Right.
Conversely, there are 77 million ICE vehicles that are sold locally. So you can see actually that the scale of ICE manufacturing is so much more, and therefore, of course, when you have economies of scale, the prices per unit goes down, right?
Right.
And so when you apply that to, let's say Proton comes up with an EV, how many EVs can they make and sell?
Correct.
Right?
Especially when their market is basically centered.
Actually. And so the issue with that is that inevitably the price per unit is going to be higher than, let's say, a Tesla that can produce 200,000-300,000 cars, EVs a year, versus a manufacturer that can only sell maybe 10, 20, 30,000.
Right.
But then the investment in R&D that you need is actually about the same.
Right.
So when you spread it across a smaller number of vehicles sold, then of course the price will have to go. So the issue has always been, at least at this stage of the development of the industry, is scale. Where can you get the scale? That's why the Chinese guys, manufacturers, can sell their cars for very, not say cheap, but...
Or at least competitive prices.
Yes, correct, because their market is enormous, and they are producing hundreds of thousands of EVs per year.
Correct. So, like, okay, we look at European countries like Norway and all that, like, you know, there's I think now about 50-60% of their market is dominated by
plug-in cars.
Plug-in cars or hybrid cars. They don't import. To the best of my knowledge, they don't have a really big manufacturing operation there. So EV adoption is high. Awareness is of course high, but that doesn't isolate the problem of. Is it because, I mean, they're also probably making it easy for other markets to come in, right? So coming back to your original analogy is, if you block out the imports and you don't have the economies of scale to make it cheap for your own customers, then you're basically losing at both ends, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So you look at countries like Norway, they don't have any car manufacturing, native car manufacturing. So they just left it open. They just said that whatever it is, we are looking at tightening emissions requirements.
Right.
Cars that emit X number of CO2 grams a year, it will be taxed and taxed and taxed. So you sort of punish those guys who pollute, and that opens up the door for these non-polluting vehicles. And you don't have to do anything much in terms of giving subsidies or incentives, even though they do in the early days, but that's gradually being cut down. Because you are just saying that people, look, the environment can't take this pollution anymore. I'm going to punish those who pollute the most.
Right.
And therefore, then the market responds in terms of, okay, let's find answers
or a solution to the set of
and then the difficulty in some of those answers is, in Norway specifically. So people say, but these EVs, especially if you look at it 3-4 years ago, are expensive to buy.
Right.
Their range is limited. So what the country does in terms of helping that is actually, okay, anybody who build charging stations, I'll give you tax break.
Right.
So they encourage the building of the infrastructure via those kinds of subsidies. But the anchoring point has always been a cleaner environment.
So and the policy is driven around that.
And that's actually something that in Malaysia that we find that there's not enough voices that are loud enough to say that, look, our air is clean today, but what are we going to leave our children?
Right, 15 years from now. So, and just one more thing, if it's always been a chicken and egg story, like, oh, okay, we got EV cars, we don't have charging station, or do you get the charging station first, then sell the EV cars, right? So, but you do sense that with the kind of product introductions that most major manufacturers are doing, a lot of that is driven to EVs and everything. So you probably, the car makers have reacted. They already understand that this is what they need. And when you talk about policies and you know, getting the best solution to the problem, do you still think that now is it an infrastructure problem?
I think that the infrastructure definitely has room to improve in Malaysia. But the fact that this one masuk lift tekan butang sikit lah, that MyVault has been out there advocating the cause, highlighting the issues, and so private investors have started to come in to invest in charging infrastructure.
Right.
In addition to what the government has already been doing.
Right.
So we see it as like, yes, the chicken and egg is there, but as long as both parties or all parties are aware of what's happening and they're talking, so they can sort of plan knowing, for example, now that we have the Taycan, we have Mini Electric, you have BMW i3S, and we have heard actually that the MG Electric is coming, and then we have heard that the XC40 Electric is also is going to come. So that gives confidence to these private guys to invest in more charging infrastructure. So the underlying key is actually like, let's share this information, what we're planning to do. So when there's also the charging providers are open in terms of, oh, we're going to open Icro ada, and then Gunung Semanggol ada, it also gives confidence to the planning side of those manufacturers to say, okay lah, now more confident a bit to introduce these models. And then I can also talk to my customers saying that, look, now maybe a bit more problem, but maybe in 6 months' time, there's going to be charges here.
Yeah.
So when you share information more openly like that, it gives the whole market a lift. So rather than just keeping it quiet, I want to build my charging network in secret because I don't want competitors to come in. But that doesn't help anybody.
Doesn't help anyone, right? And the entire infrastructure is it must be, it's the same reason your car, my car runs on the same fuel, because we all know it can. So when you do know that, that's why we never worry about fueling up.
Absolutely, it gives people confidence to know that you can charge at Icro, you can charge at Tapah, you can charge at wherever.
Right. So if we were to summarize being an EV owner, leading a group of enthusiastic EV owners, what are the pros and cons? If you could come up with maybe three each.
So coming from an individual owner's perspective, driving an EV is fantastic because it's quiet, it's torquey, it's very low maintenance. You leave your home every morning to go out with a car that is fully charged. So basically like full tank of petrol every day because you charge at home. So the pros are all there. It's quiet, it's clean, you feel good about the fact that you are not spewing CO, NOx, all these particulates into the environment.
I suppose in the case of the Taycan, the Tesla, they look good as well. I mean, they look just as good as any other conventional.
They're fantastic. But then, I mean, they belong to the premium market, right? So that's the nice part about it. So there's I can't really think of, to be honest, is actually like what are the cons of driving, other than the fact that for going outstation you cannot just pick up and go. You need to have you need to plan, and especially when you go outstation, you really have to have this confidence that whenever you get to a charging station, that, like I said earlier, it's not going to be blocked by some lorry, it's not going to be like broken and so on, because the charging infrastructure outside of KL and Penang and JB today is kind of sparse. It's thin, and I think we are working hard to lobby private sector as well as the government to look into this what we call the charging corridor all around Malaysia, that would enable more confidence in travelling outstation. Right.
And then you might not have to plan so much.
Correct.
You could then pick up and go.
It's easier to do it. Yes.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Injesha.
Welcome.
I should say thank you, Dr. Shahrol. Thank you. And stay safe. We'll catch up with you soon with another exciting topic. Bye.